My name is Scott Cowan. I'm a partner in the emerging growth practice of DLA Piper in the New Jersey office. I'm also the chair of their corporate practice. We like to say we focus on working with early and emerging growth companies, taking them all the way from inception through liquidity, helping you raise your money, venture financing, ABC rounds. Exit may be M&A, exit may be IPO. These days, it's obviously a lot more M&A. I want to turn it over to you. A little intro, background on yourself.
Hi, Barclay, Blair. So I head up our AI innovation team at DLA. So that means that I build things. So essentially, we are a group of software developers and data scientists, attorneys, product folks that are basically trying to, corral this insane wave of activity around generative AI for the firm and for the benefit of our clients. So a little more context. So I'm part of a practice at the firm that has been around for a few years called the Data Analytics and AI practice. And so the core part of that practice is advising organizations on the legal issues of AI. So what's really fun for me as a product guy is that we're AI counsel for OpenAI, so we're defending them in a defamation suit against ChatGPT right now, for Microsoft, for Anthropic, for AWS, and then on the usage side, we're AI counsel for Walmart and Eli Lilly, as well as many other smaller organizations. So from my perspective, it's a great vantage point to see what is happening on the sort of creation side of these models and also what's happening on the consumption side. So happy to share that with you today.
If you can't tell, he's the guy you want to hear speak today, not me. First, Propellify, thank you, Aaron, the whole team. It's wonderful what you guys do year after year. Really appreciate it, and thank you for including us every year. So when Barclay and I went through the agenda for all of the seminars, we tried to figure out what makes the most sense. We have lawyers out here. How do you get an audience to listen to lawyers? How do they want that? And so the title of this is Legally Speaking, What Do Founders Need to Know About AI? We have about 15 questions. We can go through them. Barclay's got a ton to say. He told me earlier he can speak for 5 hours if you let him. But I know you all have your own questions as well. So we'll go through about 1 or 2 questions, and then if you guys have things you specifically want answered, just raise your hand and we'll jump right into those. Before we start going into regulation and sales and procurement issues and things that I think this audience really cares about, just let's get a baseline. What is AI to you? What is your perspective? If someone says to you, define AI, what does Barclay Blair say?
Well, let's see. How many people here think they know what AI is? Like, how many people would be willing to share that definition with us? Oh, the hands went down. Yeah? Do we have a mic in the crowd? Yeah.
So I think AI is practically, it's an evolution of all the predictive analytics. It's where, Siri and Alexa started from. Now it's become more sophisticated as the Siris and predictive analytics have come to understand our behavior and, more importantly, our needs. So it is an artificial supplement of our brain and basically our goals.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, round of applause. So my definition is that AI is essentially a meaningless term. It doesn't really mean anything, right? It means anything we want, especially right now. Everybody wants to sprinkle magic AI fairy dust on everything and say we have a product, right? And even if you look in the academic community, it's sort of a term, again, that's been squeezed so hard that it doesn't really mean much other than it means intelligence that's artificial, right? But so for our purposes, let's talk about a useful definition, which I would say AI is, attempting to replicate human intelligence via a computer. So in essence, I look at it as an umbrella category. And it's used really imprecisely, but let's say that's the umbrella category. In that category, what makes up AI? Well, one thing is an algorithm, right? And what's an algorithm? An algorithm is just a set of instructions. So your grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe is an algorithm. It's a set of instructions designed to produce an outcome. So now that's all an algorithm is. It's just that at scale and going really quickly. Machine learning. Machine learning is a form of essentially teaching an algorithm what you want it to do by, rather than creating rules like if you see this, then do that, by showing it data and saying, here, we want you to learn from this data, right? So those three things kind of mix together. And so why does it matter? Why does any of this matter? Well, the reason that we are talking about this today is because something changed, right? Something has changed recently. And what is that thing? That's ChatGPT, right? So ChatGPT is sort of representative of a leap forward, many would say, for AI that happened this year. And the leap forward is a new form of AI called generative AI. So how many people have played with DALL-E or Midjourney, right? So that's another form of generative AI designed to produce images. And there's more models designed to produce video and so on. The one that we're most familiar with mostly is the text model. So what's new about generative AI? And we'll get into this. We'll answer this question in a number of ways as we talk. But what's new about it is that it offers the promise of being able to do lots of really specific things with a general purpose model, right? Not AGI. So AGI is artificial general intelligence, the singularity, the thing that's going to rise up and kill us all if you listen, depending on who you listen to. And AGI is sort of that singularity, that idea, the Terminator, whatever. Pick your demographic of what represents that for you. That has been getting a lot of play in the media. It's really, it's a topic that grabs lots of people's attention. But my opinion is we're not close to that. But LLMs, ChatGPT being one of them, have surprised us all, because we got to this place where apparently we have this machine that understands human language and can generate human language. And we didn't think we'd get there for a long time. So the promise is that we now have this general purpose model that we can apply to multiple problems without having to train a model from scratch, right? So to your point, we interact with AI every day. A recommendation engine on Spotify, Netflix, Amazon is that, but that's a model that has been trained for one purpose, really, which is to show us content that's far enough outside our comfort that it's going to expand our viewership or listenership into that without freaking us out, right? That's sort of what it's designed to do. So that's a narrow purpose, and that you need a lot of data, a lot of expertise, a lot of time, and a really good business case to do that. Generative AI, you access it via an API. It's inexpensive, at least to get started. You don't have to do any training. And with some pretty decent, just good prompts and other techniques that are much less expensive, you can do really powerful things. So keep that in mind. There's, it seems ridiculous to say traditional AI, sort of pre-ChatGPT and generative AI, but it is one way to kind of think of it, and that's how we think of it. Yeah.
All right, so I think everyone here now fully understands everything there is to know about
of
AI.
Course,
So
yes.
That's fantastic. So let's shift to the legal regulatory side of things for a moment. What's happening with AI regulation around the globe and in the U.S. that the U.S. founders in this audience should be concerned about?
Yeah, so I think the short story is that there's going to be no federal law on AI for the foreseeable future, certainly not before the next election. We may see a bit of tuning around issues of deep fakes and synthesis of voice and image for election laws and trying to prohibit that. That's an issue that our policymakers feel personally very strongly about. So 2 weeks ago, I was in D.C., and we did on a stage like this with Senator Rounds and Heinrich, who are from the AI caucus in the Senate, leading initiative with Schumer to try and do something at a federal level. And really what they're focused on right now is just increasing literacy amongst policymakers. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by how literate they were on AI, which, let's breathe a sigh of relief. That's good. So nothing is probably going to happen in the short term from a big picture perspective. So right now the debate in Washington is that needed, right? In general in the U.S., we're not big fans of big federal laws. We tend to want to regulate things via existing mechanisms. So every regulator you've ever heard of is doing something around AI regulation. FTC, FAA, SEC, FTC. So one of the debates is, will it ultimately be regulated at the industry level, or will there be sort of an overall law? So in insane amounts of activity and interest. I think it's all over the map in terms of what's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen in the short term. Broadly speaking, I could say there's some that believe that AI should be licensed, and there should be a new agency that grants organizations who meet certain criteria the ability to create really powerful AIs. And conceivably, for some period of time, that could be a regulatory choke point. So to do what's called a frontier run to create, say, GPT-4, we actually know the data centers in the world capable of doing that. So that has been a proposal. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Europe is taking a different approach. And essentially, as we experienced with GDPR, as Europe goes, the rest of the world goes, whether we like it or not, because it regulates activities with European citizens. If anyone does a business with them, that's going to affect them. They're taking a very top-down approach to AI regulation. They passed the framework, and now the implementation of that's going to happen over the next few years. So pay attention to that. In general, their focus is on making sure that AI is safe. That's sort of what it's focused on. And then some litigation is starting to emerge. We'll talk a bit more about that when we talk about IP, but yeah.
Fantastic. All right, let's jump into some more practical issues that the audience may encounter. Contracting, procurement issues, for example. You know, there's a new stack of technology platforms. We just talked about a bunch of them, and services emerging. What should founders be aware of as they navigate the legal agreements, the contracts that paper all these various links in the chain? Any novel issue that they and, frankly, their attorneys should be aware of?
Yeah, I think so. So, you know, along with this new capability, a new commercial model is emerging. And so there's uncertainties in that model. So if you use someone else's model and it does something harmful, are you liable, or are they liable? Is OpenAI liable if you leverage GPT-4 via their API? OpenAI's position on that is that you're the user, you're the implementer, that's your issue. That is very unresolved in commercial agreements and in the courts. And that's a sort of a frontier issue. So think about practically, as you build your stack, if you're building on AI, what are all the links in that chain? How many of those links are very new organizations or open source? And how do you paper those agreements? And so think about uptime and all the usual things, but think about what it means from an AI perspective. Then also think about liability and those issues and how you're going to navigate those. Again, simply speaking, like we have a case right now where OpenAI is being, sued for defamation because of something, negative that ChatGPT said. Now that's a test case, right? That's a case designed to establish law in this area, and there's many other suits along those lines. So I think being aware of most small founders are going to be leveraging big foundation models, but there's also, of course, open source models that are very performant, and you may want to consider those from the perspective of you want transparency and visibility into how that model was trained, right? And the data that was used to train it. And there's unknown liability right now around the theory that if you trained your model on my IP, that you owe me something, and there's multiple lawsuits around that. I can tell you, not speaking for DLA, but me personally, I think that argument is actually nonsensical, and it's because of the way that these models work, and I'm not going to go into detail, but essentially the model is not a database of content out in the cloud. It's a statistical representation of the relationships amongst words. So it's something very different that we don't really know how to think about, but here's how I would put it. So if I learned how to read from, let's say you published 25 books, all I ever read was your books, and then I wrote a book, it has nothing to do with anything you wrote about, do I owe you a royalty? Because I learned to read and write from reading your books. That's kind of the equivalent of what's happening with LLMs, and so those are the frontier issues on IP. So So just pay attention to those issues and as you build your sort of stack of suppliers and technology. Yeah.
You want to shift to IP a little bit here?
Sure.
Okay. Before I even do that, actually, halfway through, let me just check, see if anyone have any questions here.
So I have a question. So about 15 or 20 years ago, I don't exactly remember, the singer Tom Waits, who is famous for having a really gravelly voice, he successfully won a case in court when some food company used an imitation of his voice. They didn't say it was Tom Waits, but it sounded exactly like him, and he won in court for use of his distinct intellectual property. Right now, though, you can use a language a trainer to essentially replicate that voice. Do you think that if he were to go to court for the same reason with someone who'd use a language processor, that he would win again, or do you think that's something for the past?
Yeah, I think he would absolutely win against the organization that used his voice in an unauthorized way. The more interesting question is who would be liable. So would it be the ad agency in this case, or would it be the provider of the technology that synthesized his voice? Right now I could tell you that nothing's changed. You are stealing his likeness essentially, and we know that's a protected right. So the law would be the same. The novel issue is the ad agency would 100% be liable, but they would also sue the provider. 100% they would sue the provider of that model. And that's the frontier issue, is that are they liable for that? And so it's a great way to put that question. And there's no answer to that right now. I wouldn't want to be sued for that, so that's something to be very careful about.
Got another question.
Hi. This is basically, I guess, to take the points you were just making a little bit further, maybe with a specific example. So say, what advice would you give to a founder that maybe is looking to train a large language model on user manuals, for example? So say printers. Everyone's printers break, and other than unplugging them and plugging them back in, say you want to train a large language model on every printer manual that's out there, but those are kind of the IP of each printer company. But don't have unlimited resources. I'm a startup founder.
This is the sexiest business model I've ever heard.
It's don't steal my idea, everyone. No, I'm just kidding. But
it's a good one.
What if I have the AI essentially spitting out, the user asks a question and it spits out a line from one of these manuals for a specific model. How do I get my HP 132 to stop paper jamming? How would I approach that as a startup founder, knowing that my resources are limited, that I don't want to tread into dangerous territory, but still be able to provide this kind of a service?
Yeah, so the question is if you wanted to build a business based on ingesting a bunch of printer manuals and do generations from those printer manuals to provide people with help, how do you protect yourself from liability, IP issues, and so on? So, the easy answer is, by the way, I'm not a lawyer, just to be clear. I'm a technology guy. I started out, before this era, there was the dot-com era. That's when I started out and built a company and sold it to IBM. But so just to be clear. But why I'm here talking to you is because I'm trying to answer all these questions right now for myself and inside a law firm, which is even has additional professional and ethical obligations that are very challenging to address. We would never be able to do that unless we had crystal clear agreements or a legal theory that we had documented with legal advice about the ownership of that training data and our ability to use it. So our standard for that would be very high. We happen to have access to lots of lawyers to help us do that. As a founder, you don't. So I think think about have a story to tell in terms of what do you believe that you have the ability to leverage that training content, and be prepared to defend it potentially. I think, look, the question in any lawsuit is always who has the money to sue you and the motivation, and what do they expect to get? People are suing OpenAI for obvious reasons, that they have deep pockets. And they're very prominent, right? So that's the other side of it, is who would be upset in your case, and think about that. One other point I would say is that, remember that an LLM, a generative AI model, all it's actually doing is predicting what the next word in a sentence should be, okay? So this is kind of a weird concept to wrap your brain around. It doesn't know what an HP printer is. It knows nothing about what it's talking about. It is just a brain that has been trained on all the data on the internet, let's say, or in this case, all the printer manuals in the world, to recognize that if you say, I have a paper jam, what's the next word that's going to come after that, and to predict that. That's all it's doing. Now, all it's doing, that's really sophisticated and complicated, and it does surprising things, but it doesn't actually know anything. So the reason that I think personally that the theory of liability on this isn't legitimate is that it's actually generating your text anew every time you talk to it. It's not storing that text in a database and regurgitating it. So in my view, the IP case is much less clear, right? It's not literally cutting and pasting that content from the manual into my generation, into my prompt return. So I think this is a novel concept that we haven't really encountered before in society, much less the law. Yeah. Is that helpful? Yeah.
I told you he was good.
I had heard that Microsoft, in order to get more corporate clients, was going to stand behind its AI products when their client was sued for the content generated by their product.
Yes, so great point. So Microsoft recently announced that if you get sued over IP issues while using Copilot, that they will defend you, or they will take on the liability of that. So what can I say about that? Let's see. I think that from a practitioner perspective, it's still a little unclear to us whether that's a kind of PowerPoint level promise or whether that's a real thing. We don't really know. Like the announcement wasn't super clear about that. So I don't know the actual impact of that. But clearly the intention there is to signal from Microsoft's perspective that they are not infringing on anyone's copyrights, and they are willing to stand behind that. And they deduce quite correctly that this is a boogeyman that's going to prevent a lot of people from adopting this technology, and somehow they need to address it and not wait for the law to kind of work its way through that chaotic process. So it's a very smart move on their part, I think, and I think it is a really good example of a company that is being led in that move by its engineers, because the engineers will strongly be making the argument that it's not infringing because it is every word is turned into a set of numbers. That set of numbers is turned into a model with a bunch of weights and relationships statistically, and is that actually a representation of your intellectual property? And their argument clearly would be no. And that's how I would look at it from a technology perspective. But as we all know, the law doesn't necessarily make sense, right? And the way things happen don't necessarily line up with that. But I think it's a great point. So one of the biggest Microsoft is betting its very future on generative AI. It is made, so for those of you that don't know, they are the primary VC investor in OpenAI. And we don't know exactly how that deal works, but substantially they are providing Azure resources to OpenAI that probably to the tune of tens of millions of dollars at least a month. Copilot, which is Microsoft's upcoming product, which we have access to at the law firm, which I'm not supposed to say, but is the Microsoft police going to come get me? I don't know. We'll see. But it is generative AI. Essentially, think of it as ChatGPT built in to Outlook, into Word, into Excel, into PowerPoint. You can upload a Word document into PowerPoint, and it will create a PowerPoint presentation. It's all the things you can do in ChatGPT, but built in to the Office suite. So that's where generative AI is going to have real impact on this world, and it will just be. It's a feature of how we work, not a extra. It'll become like spell check. I mean, spell check technically is a kind of a form of AI. It's machine learning at least. So huge bet. So that's one of the reasons they're making that statement. Yeah.
let's dive into the sales aspect for a moment. You can maybe start with the enterprise side of things. Any thoughts?
So who here is developing products with AI, or AI is part of it? Anyone? Yeah. So I think that so one of the most active parts of our firm in the AI space is the IT contracting and procurement lawyers, because the procurement issues are kind of complex. And so one of the biggest barriers that I see to adoption through that process is just that it can be difficult to buy this capability. So if you're building product in this area, spend a lot of time thinking about how to make it easy to buy, right? And this is true with any form of innovation. Think about, what the concerns are going to be from the buyer's perspective and how they can easily say yes. So is this something they're consuming via an API? Are you selling it on a per seat? Can you sell it on a per seat license that they're familiar with? Is there a platform fee? Like, thinking through how to price this and how to package it in a way that is easily consumed. Now, I'm talking here mostly about corporate-facing product or B2B, where, look, the reality is that you could have the best product in the world and it will still take you 6 months to get through the procurement process at a big company and another 4 months to get paid. So anything you can do to make that easier, start thinking about that now. I mean, that's certainly one thing I would say. Yeah.
Okay. I want to spend a minute or two talking about the social impact. We all know how incredibly transformative AI is and is going to be. We just heard Barclay talk about it for a little bit. People are going to lose jobs. Open roles are not going to be filled. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, I've spent my career in the tech industry, and I think that, one of the things that consistently happens is, I'm sure there's no tech bros here. I don't see any, but we can be incredibly tone deaf about the implications of the things we build, right? And we're really excited about them. They're amazing. They're transformative. Whatever bullshit we put in our PowerPoint presentations, that is true. But we always have to be sensitive to the fact that there's a flip side to that. And AI is that. Like, let's be real. AI is going to transform our world, probably in many areas much more quickly than we realize or are prepared for. Let's just take some easy examples. If you're a stock photographer, you're over. I mean, that's just kind of the reality, right? Other than look, in any market, there's always going to be high-end markets. There's going to be specialized markets. There's still punch cards out there, right? So what? The reality is that, the prospect of having to go through the process of hiring a photographer, models, go on site, hire the whole crew to do that versus type a prompt in, it's a no-brainer. So for the commercial side of art and design, that industry is going to be radically transformed, very quickly. And that sucks, right? I mean, that's a way that a lot of, I actually have a fine arts degree. I come from that background. It's a way that a lot of artists make a living. So that's 100% exposed to this capability. And let's remember, this capability is not even alpha. This capability is really, 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 really early. We're not even close to what it's going to be capable of and how quickly this is developing. You think about the billions and billions of dollars I see it every day pouring into this space. It's going to accelerate as everything does when you get into a technological transformation. So be aware of that. Don't be tone deaf about that. We are probably approaching close to the peak of the hype cycle. I mean, frankly, people losing their jobs. Generative AI.
Sorry, is that a natural language processor on the front side, and it's a generative function behind it which is either localized distributed,
Yeah.
which involves the data of a specialized field. At this point, there's no AGI yet, to solve particular problems for a particular field type.
There's no specialized data in DALL-E or in ChatGPT. So that's the revolutionary aspect here, is that it's generalized data for a general purpose that performs very well in specialized tasks like image generation. So that is a new, at scale and at the cost and at the availability, that's a new thing for our world.
Fair enough. However, then you get into the area of as far as the ability to generate.
Yeah.
The data needs to have been brought in from areas that this system is going to be concentrated or able to concentrate functionally. That's where the issue as far as the rights show up and are unknown to a degree at this point. So there's a lot that's not been copyrighted that exists throughout the internet, that compose the internet, and then there is data that has been copyrighted that may or may not be wise to make use of.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and I think I talked about that in the sense that you're right. So there's new issues in intellectual property around whether or not a generative model is actually stealing someone's intellectual property. Some people say that it is, some people say that it's not, and that will be an unsettled issue, I think, for some time. So in theory, it could emerge to be a large enough issue that it stops this momentum. I really don't think it is. I mean, did Uber have permission in every city it went into before it became Uber? I mean, no. There's sort of a model in this world where technological innovation sort of steamrolls through a lot of things. So I don't know if that's going to happen with OpenAI, but I think that, or generative AI rather, but I think the momentum is really strong, and I do think those issues are resolvable. Look, at the end of the day, if foundation model providers end up, paying fractions of a cent for my blog post, is it going to really hobble them? I don't know. I don't think so, right? So that's what I mean. I think I can tell you that, like, so the practice of law is probably the most exposed profession to generative AI. So lawyers are machines that ingest text through their ears and their eyes, and they output it through their mouth and their fingertips. So if you look at any academic study about exposure, sorry, that's a very reductionist view. I apologize, but if you look at any study from any institution on this, lawyers are 100% of their jobs are exposed to generative AI. So as a firm, that's one of the reasons I'm there. We want to not be a victim of that, but to drive our fate as much as we can there. And that's going to mean radical changes, I think, for how law is practiced, because it simply drives crazy amounts of productivity for a lot of the things lawyers do. Just to be clear, generating text is sort of the core thing that happens here, but I can use GPT-4, I can use Anthropic to look at a 150-page contract and tell me, is this contract assignable? And it will give me the answer now. So I haven't read any of the contract, I have no context, I haven't trained the model, I have done none of that, and the answer is instant and it's correct. So it's really transformative for that kind of work. So anyways, the point is, just be aware of that. Sorry, questions, yes.
So you have a client who is aware that when they launch their AI product, it's going to lead to a large amount of unemployment, but they are interested in mitigating that negative effect. Obviously it'll depend on what they're doing, but in broad strokes, what would you suggest to them?
I mean, I think, so the question was, in a particular organization that has leveraged AI and already has used that to replace various positions, what should they do? I mean, that's probably over my pay grade, but the way that I view that is that I think it's very difficult in individual industries and organizations to try and mitigate that, just as it has been, in any technological innovation. I would say, for example, the WGA strike very much got a lot of publicity. And I would just remind people that, like, let's remember that the job of screenwriter didn't exist before the invention of film, which is a technology, right? The job of video game voiceover person didn't exist 5 years ago. The job of television writer, of editor, of sound recording engineer, these are all jobs that were created by technology. I'm an optimist about technology. I believe that, like technologies before it, AI is already and will continue to create new jobs that we don't have now. And I think, like, our standard of living in the West, at least, has 100% risen because of technological innovation. And is AI going to be different than that? I don't know. I mean, it could be, but I don't think it will be, for whatever that's worth.
Hi. I'm really interested in the long-term economic impact.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Okay. I said I'm really interested in the long-term economic impacts of this. If we have something like the Amazon Go stores, and like you mentioned, the actors and the writers are realizing that it's not necessary to have them there, or it's not necessary to go to expensive locations to make movies. What do you see once AI gets past this initial stage and reaches what you called alpha stage? What do you see happening when we realize that perhaps we don't need people anymore for front of house interaction to make industries work? If we only need the humans to restock the yogurt and the oranges at night, and Amazon can run an entire store without people, if we can make better movies without Tom Cruise there, how do you think people will take it long term when they realize that maybe their economic ability to earn in person, their value, which all of us tag to the fact that we went to school, we have degrees, we feel we have something to offer. Yeah. Do you think that AI might eventually put us at the back, and like you said, we might only be needed for punch card jobs, construction, warehousing, but not exactly our best aspect, which is human? Here I am, here's my face. Do you think that AI might end up being center stage and we're just back of house in about 5 years?
Well, what do you think?
It's looking like that. I mean, just socially, if you just look at how people are responding to AI generally, wouldn't you say that there's a large amount of mistrust, that people are wondering about their place in this world, which has always been humans first? A lot of people don't trust it. A lot of people have questions that they feel are maybe being handled at spaces like this, but it's not widespread. So
I don't have an answer. I guess I would just say that, you know, how has this gone so far with technological innovation? What has happened? Has it been arrested through laws and regulations? I mean, it hasn't, right? So I don't know, but I wouldn't expect anything different here. And I think that we will see a transformation in society where there's going to be winners and losers, 100%. Of course there is. And I think that's going to be very difficult. I think it's going to be really sad for a lot of people in a lot of industries, 100%. I think that's how it goes with technological transformations. I do believe the opportunities for AI are also incredibly powerful for humanity. We're involved in a couple of programs at the UN where AI gives us the ability to provide services and care and insight and analysis and medical care and drug discovery at orders of magnitude lower cost than it ever could have been done before. So, like all technology transformations, the benefit and the harm is going to be felt unequally in society, 100%. But, you know, that's a philosophical conversation that I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be weighing in on, but I'm happy to talk about it. You know, if you want after.
So I know there's a few other questions. We're being cut off. I think it's Aaron and not some kind of deep fake in the corner. So we got to cut it off. Barclay, thank you. I hope that was as informative for you as it was for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
How about
Give a big round of applause. Thanks, Blair and Scott, for your time.